Well, if you recall, a few days ago, I believe it was August the 29th, I had my son Walter here from Richmond to talk about Frank Lloyd Wright and his 150th birthday, and we talked a lot about Frank Lloyd Wright buildings and so forth. And he agreed to come back and talk about some of the projects that he's done in Richmond. Walter has been an architect. Well, he graduated from Virginia Tech in 1985, and he's been an architect ever since. He started his own business in 1993, and he still has his own business in Richmond. It's on Adams Street, near Broad Street, and he's got a very fine business. So I'm delighted that he's agreed to come up here and talk about some of the major projects that he and his firm has done in Richmond. So good morning, Walter. It's good to see you again. I appreciate you coming up here.
It's great to be here.
You ought to be able to stay for lunch this time.
I can. Maybe dinner. Depends.
Maybe dinner too, huh? Good. All right. Well, tell us a little bit about I guess we have to go back to your childhood a little bit to really talk about Walter Parks, the architect.
So everybody always wants to know, how did you get to be an architect? What made you decide to become an architect? And you know, as you get asked that question, you get better answers over time, right? You figure it out.
Maybe I'll learn something.
I get to attribute it to that. You know, when we were kids, when I was kids, we lived in Greece. We lived in Turkey, and we were surrounded by ancient ruins of great architectural, import. Yeah. I always like to say that I played hide and seek on the Parthenon, which is not everybody can say that, which is pretty cool.
And some of the 7 churches of the Bible in Turkey, you did the same thing, sliding down the columns.
Sliding down the columns, the Colosseum in Rome, all of those things had an impact on what I recall. Also, the house that we lived in Greece was just fantastic. It was
sort of a Frank Lloyd Wright house, wasn't it?
That would be a stretch, but I'll go with that. It was a very modern house.
Yeah,
it had the cantilever or suspended stair. It was fantastic, and it was very different than everything else that we ever lived in. And certainly,
did that really have an impression on you? I had no idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I can draw you the detail of how that stair was made. So that, and then that really sort of combined with, as a kid, we had, we talked about Frank Lloyd Wright, and he had Freuble toys. Well, I already had Lego, and I built things out of Lego, and we'll still to this day.
You were very imaginative while you did it.
We made all kinds of really cool things. And
do you remember when you started building with Lego?
It was in Turkey.
I thought it was in Turkey.
It was.
I think we brought some Lego down from Germany, and that was the first time we'd ever seen Lego.
Yeah, I think that's right.
We'd been building with American bricks and Lincoln logs up to that point.
Right, yeah. Right. And those were just, you couldn't do as much with them.
Yeah.
The Legos you could make.
We just didn't realize that the Lincoln logs had been made by Frank Lloyd Wright's son. Is that?
That's right. But it didn't make it. You couldn't do that much more with them.
Okay.
So you get that sort of as a background about making things. Being an architect is all about making things, and we built things in the house. Yeah. We the idea of being able to build things and how things come together, and how what you create. It's all about creating things, and so. That was sort of the driving factor, and so you take that sort of background, and you get to when I went to school, there were a couple of really important people. Everybody goes to school. There's the mentor, right? There's the people that really catch your attention, and we had a Swiss architect by the name of Olivio Ferrari, who was sort of one step removed from the Bauhaus. And he was very influential.
But that was at Tech.
That was at Tech, right.
Didn't you have somebody in high school that as I recall, you took an architectural drafting course in high school because you had to have a desire to go into architecture before you got there?
Yeah, well, I did take a drafting course, and I did well in it. But it was a very different kind of thing. It was a
okay, but you got the seeds from the Greek architecture, the Parthenon.
Yeah.
Have we seen the Parthenon? Did we?
We had a
go
picture
through
of
that
it.
Picture? I don't remember.
No. Okay, so that one's Tech.
This is Virginia Tech. Okay.
Yep. So when I was
Let's
at
go
Tech,
back to Tech.
so when I was at Tech, we took trips. We took trips to Chicago, Frank Lloyd Wright. We took trips to all through Europe, and it's really about exposure to architecture and understanding. And really, those guys were not about making buildings as much as opening your mind to creating problem solving.
Yeah.
Problem solving in a creative way.
Yeah.
And Buckminster Fuller had a quote. It was basically that you problem solve, you form, follow, function, but if you end up with ugly, you did it wrong. So the idea is that you problem solve in a way towards elegance. So I leave school and I come to Richmond. A cool thing. When I was in school, still, I got a job with Cooper Lecky Architects.
Yeah, well, that's right. A summer job
in Georgetown, and I got to work on the Vietnam War Memorial.
Oh, okay.
which was the most important. It's been downhill ever since. I've never done a project that important. So.
But you didn't design it.
No, not at all. It's a Maya Lin design.
Yeah,
And it was an
Well,
elegant.
what about work ethic? Did you learn something about that at Tech?
When yeah, absolutely. So there was a point in time when I would turn on the lights in the studio in the morning, and I would be the one that turned them off in the night. And it was one period where I would actually stay up all through the night, every third night, just to get more work done, which was kind of crazy and probably bad for me.
And this is at Virginia Tech?
Yeah, absolutely.
You did all that?
Yeah.
Lord, you weren't out with the girls.
No, not at that point.
All right.
Maybe I should have been. But so that sort of drive, that sort of that was instilled there as well.
Oh, good.
But so we left there and got to Richmond, and Richmond at that point in time was a little staid. There wasn't the sort of push in the country was sort of away from a modern architecture. It was to a more traditional form based architecture.
Was Ernie Rose more of a traditional, or was he?
Well, so I'll get to him in a minute. So when I first came to town, I actually interviewed with guys who told me that I would never work there.
Oh.
I would never work in Richmond, which was kind of.
I remember your first job. You were working on something down at Williamsburg or no?
Williamsburg.
Actually, Jamestown.
So I got to do preliminary design work on a bunch of things.
On that, okay.
But none of them were ever built.
Yeah.
So we did a bunch of preliminary design work. To have a bunch of drawings, I'm against having drawings that aren't built. I'm about making buildings, and I want to see things materialized. So that was difficult. So that didn't go. It was okay, but it didn't really pan out. Didn't go very well. And then I went to work with another group, and that didn't work out very well. And then I went to work for Ernie Rose, and that didn't work very well. But the interesting thing about that guy was one of the things that always appalled me about architects was that they didn't understand what things cost. And really, we talked about Frank Lloyd Wright before. He was notorious for having the final cost of the building be 2-3 times what his original estimates were. And my goal being to build things and actually make things, that's counterintuitive. That doesn't help me at all. So one of the things that was great about Ernie Rose was that he really understood what the costs about things were, and that really was important to me because when I got my own practice together, I was always. I had one project that really was out of whack on price, and that's because the owner told me, Walter, if I have to write a bigger check, I'll write a bigger check. I didn't have the forethought. I didn't know at the time when I was just going to say, well, is that $10 million? Is that $100 million? What's a bigger check to you? And and that was just me not having enough education and enough.
So you were going to spend
smarts.
his money for him. Huh?
Well, that's what you hire an architect for.
Yeah,
you hire an architect to spend your money, right?
I won't comment on it.
That's absolutely right. You're gonna convert money to building.
That's right. Yeah.
And you want to convert it in the smart way. You want to convert. You want to get the thing you want for as close to the money you want to spend as you can get.
That's right.
Most people's thing they want and money they want to spend don't equate at all. So that's part of an education process too. But so, once I started my practice, early on, you just sort of do whatever you can to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And then I got a commission. I think it's at the American Tobacco Building. I think we have that.
Well, this is actually you've got your own firm.
Yeah.
Let's go through the Lee House.
So that's where I'm. That's where.
Yeah, I think we want to. Go back.
So this is American Tobacco.
Yeah, but we want to go back. Let's go back to the Lee House because that's your. That's it.
So that's.
Tell us about the Lee House.
So.
You were in there about 6, 7, 8, 10 years, weren't you?
Something like that.
With your own firm, yeah.
So this is the house in Richmond, Virginia that Robert E. Lee's family lived in through the war. They watched the city burn from the back porch. Yeah. When he rode into town, he got off his horse and walked in the door, and didn't leave for several days. And the house used to be a museum, but it's sort of fallen into a little bit of disrepair, I'd say, and we had offices in it. There was an architect on the first floor. There was a restaurant in the basement, and then an office on the other floors. My office.
You had the second floor.
My office was on the second floor,
yeah.
And then I guess I had 4 people working with me at that point.
You had the whole floor. Huh?
Yeah, it was the floor of a house.
So that was in the early days. That's when you really were scratching to find jobs.
You scratch to find whatever you can find.
Yeah.
And then a great job came my way, which was the American Tobacco project, which I think we have that picture. So this is actually the rooftop of American Tobacco, and this was an old tobacco plant.
Is that this pool? Does that show the?
So this is the pool that we installed on the roof.
Yeah, the Richmond papers had a picture of it, as I recall, being lifted by a crane on the top of the building. That was made the headlines in the paper that day.
We had a massive crane lift that one-piece pool up onto the 6th story of a building.
How big is the building? How many apartments in?
There are about 250 apartments in that building. Yeah, it's almost an entire city block. The building is several different buildings put together, really. If you think about it, there's one, and then as the business improved, they added more buildings.
Now, this is not just going in and doing some little things. This is actually demolishing the whole interior of the building, isn't it?
Well, we
keep the interior was pretty good size, I suspect.
Yeah, we keep the structure. We keep as much of the what you want to do is you want to find the things in the building that are interesting and valuable, right? There are parts of the building like the exposed brick walls, the beautiful old maple floors, the heavy timber beams. No one's going to build a building like that today. So by going in and taking advantage of all those things and restoring them a little bit, but we leave them a little rough. I like to see the scars. I like to see the trail in the floor where the carts used to go, where they used to, drag tobacco hogsheads. We leave the smokestack. The smokestack is now a part of we turned it into a cigar room. What could be more appropriate?
Yeah. Okay.
The next photograph, I think we have one of it was the power plant of the buildings, and we turned that into really sort of a clubhouse space.
Is this it?
That's it, and we built in a mezzanine, and you can see we like I said, we leave things a little rough. There's a mechanical ducts that we run through,
and this is part of the tobacco warehouse?
Yeah, that's inside.
Oh, okay.
So you can see the exposed brick walls in the back. And then the pieces that we build into it are all modern and precise, and then we to counterbalance the sort of rough industrial piece.
Well, the stoveworks, I've been through the stoveworks, and I recall all the things you left in there that were very interesting.
So that project, the American Tobacco Project, led us to several other good-sized projects. The Stoveworks project was among them. I think we have one photo of that, really, of an entrance canopy. Oh no, we'll get to that one in a minute.
It's the one before that, I think. No.
Nope, we're missing it. That's okay. So from this point, with my goal started to be, it wasn't so much about building an individual building, but sort of rehabilitating a city.
Yeah.
When we talked about Frank Lloyd Wright last time, we talked about how when he came to Chicago, there was a big influx into the cities because of the industrialization.
Right. Yeah.
And at this point in the last 10, 15 years, there's been an influx again into the cities that, in the 50s and 60s, people were moving further and further out into the suburbs. And now we're starting to see that come back. And the cities themselves are a little shabby. And so it created this void that we got to be a part of filling.
But what you did is with the American Tobacco, I presume, and the Stoveworks, is you took these old buildings that are monsters, really, many of them, and you turned them into very modern interiors. But you've kept the facade in many ways with sprucing up the grounds and the areas around it.
So we changed the entire use. So it used to be a tobacco place, and now it's apartments, or now there are offices or restaurants in them. And so we repurposed the buildings.
Yeah.
So from there, you think about repurposing a building, but then you really sort of talk about repurposing corridors of buildings, and that's where the next photo, I think, is this is a building. This is the state that we got it. It's a 3-story interior wall
on Broad Street.
Yeah, and it's so we take it from there, and that's what we get to start with.
Yeah, the next picture's the front of it.
That's the front. It's a different building, but same idea. And then the last one is sort of a finished product, where the building. These are what I call fabric buildings. These are background buildings, and to contrast again to Wright, who's doing these very dramatic, buildings to call attention to themselves. These kind of buildings are really. You want to drive down the street. Every building isn't calling attention. It doesn't need to be that important.
But you've changed what we saw there in the second picture we saw in that. We saw a facade that was poor, run down, shabby.
Right.
Now it's a modern, well, not modern looking so much as it's.
Well, it is.
It's
it is. So mostly what happens. I like the buildings when they're in bad shape, because if they're in great shape, then you're just into restoring what was there.
Yeah.
But if they're in bad shape, then you get to put into new modern pieces and I like the contrast between those two. I like the way the new plays off the old. Yeah. So that next photograph. Yeah, so this is the entrance to Stoveworks, and this is one of those things that I was talking about. Yeah. On the left and the right, you see two of the old buildings, and then we have this very modern canopy that becomes the entranceway. This building is the offices of Dovetail Construction, and this is very funny. This particular building was a trolley repair barn.
Oh.
Very humble building. The outside of it was all corrugated metal, just kind of a simple, mundane building. So we took this building, and we had a contractor who wanted to use it for his office. And he was going to use the back of it to pull his trucks into, and it was just warehouse space, and he wanted an office in the front. And the project that we ended up with was a little different than that. He does have his office there, and I think the next picture there, you can see inside the barn. The idea was that the office is almost like the trolley that you could almost insert into the trolley bay, or pull it out, right? So you're sort of free of the walls. It's this very modern piece. In the last photograph, you could see that there were. Can we go back one? There we go.
Yeah.
You can see on the left. You can see the solar panels. This building was the first historic tax credit, zero energy or energy positive LEED building in the country.
Well, you got an award for this building, didn't you?
We got lots of awards for that building.
Is that right?
Oh, and the one you're talking about. This was that building.
Virginia Living, as I recall.
USA Today named this one of the top 10 buildings to see in Virginia. Which is really ridiculous.
After you go to Monticello, you come to Richmond.
Yeah. I don't exactly know why they picked that, but it's kind of funny.
But you won't deny it.
Yeah, I'll deny it.
Okay.
It's just it was interesting and it did a lot of things.
But you've got other buildings that you would put up instead of that, huh?
I would pick a couple before that.
I see. All right, go ahead.
And so then, as we got, the projects just got bigger, and we went through the couple of high rises, and this photograph right now is the interior of the Reynolds factory. And we did.
Now, what's the Reynolds factory?
Reynolds Metals, Reynolds Aluminum.
Oh, okay.
Reynolds Aluminum was a big Richmond-based company. They had two large factories, one north of the river, one south of the river.
This is on the locks?
Yeah.
So that's not the one. Okay.
That's not the locks, but that picture we just saw was. Oh. And so we'll hit the locks in a minute, but this is another one of those examples of just inserting a modern. You want the buildings to be livable. You want to keep that sort of historic feel, the industrial feel in this case. So this used to be a big metal building that we put the swimming pool in the middle of it, and we pulled the roof away, so you still get the frame of the structure, and that becomes a trellis. This picture is a picture of the locks.
Okay.
This is a picture of the locks in, what did we say it was, 1864? 63.
You mean when Richmond burned?
This one, yeah. This picture is.
Oh, you think that's the picture at that point in time?
Yeah, that's exactly what that is.
Oh, okay. 64 is when it burned.
Yeah. So this is 1864.
Okay.
This is the locks in Richmond. That later. This is right at Locks 5, and later this is the site where Reynolds Metals took over.
Okay.
And they actually built over the locks, and when they were expanding, people didn't care quite as much about the history of these places.
Yeah, and this is where the old power plant was too that was flooded, right?
Very close, very close.
To that? Okay.
Yep. This is a modern building that we built very close to that photograph that you just saw. And so just like we would take a old building and insert a modern piece into it, so now we're going to take a series of historic buildings and add a modern building that we want it to fit in, and you could see it here. The building on the left is the Italianate building. It's an old Reynolds headquarters, and then the building behind it is a production building, which is you see the red brick columns, and then the building behind it is our new modern building, and they all kind of live and work together.
Now, did you do all of these buildings?
So all of these buildings are part of that complex.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
So, and this is you can see a little bit more of it. You can see the red building on the left here, and the white building in the foreground is also renovated.
All of those apartments?
All of those are apartments. In the Italianate buildings, we have a large restaurant on the first floor.
Okay. Any other retail space?
There's a little more, but really in that area, retail and commercial space survives better as a grouping. So we try and not spread it everywhere. You try and this is very close, 2 blocks away from Shockoe Slip.
Oh, okay.
And so you would rather have the people live there and then walk to Shockoe Slip for the coffee and the restaurants, and not dilute that. so much.
Okay, we've seen Hull, we've seen Broad Street. Now we've seen the locks. What about Hull Street?
So this one's actually.
Do we have any pictures of Hull Street?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So these next couple, we'll just skip that one.
Go ahead.
That was really about the corridors that as they get developed. So this photograph and the one before it are both buildings that are we're started to get to these modern buildings in historic context, and then we've got the places where the historic context has sort of gone away, and so those buildings can sort of be anything. And the building that you're seeing now is a 10-story or 11-story building that we built just inside of VCU. It's an apartment building. Is
it a VCU building?
It's not owned by VCU,
okay.
No. And this last slide is is a map of the city, and everything that you see in white and yellow, those are all buildings that we've done. So every single,
How many projects do you estimate you've done in Richmond? Major projects.
I don't. I know that I've done about 200 tax credit projects, rehabilitations.
200 tax credit programs.
Yeah, 200 rehabilitations.
Those are pretty big buildings. Those are big.
Some of them are. Some of them aren't. Some of them could be. It's not all about doing the giant buildings. I like to do the buildings that are. Right now we're working on several high rises, but I'm still doing the 6,000 square foot building on Broad Street because I want to bring Broad Street back.
Yeah.
I want. Yeah. And I want to see the street grow.
Now let's before we get to this picture, let's talk about Philip Morris, because that was a city block that you built.
So that's when I started to getting into development. We did doing both the architecture and the development side, and that Philip Morris building that you've been through.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've taken you through the new one. Have I taken you through the new one?
I went through the building before when you first got it, before when you first got the project, and you went over to look it over, and it was a mess. I couldn't believe that anybody could do anything. It had to be a complete new job. You didn't serve any floors in that building, I don't think.
No, that was.
But you turned it into what, 155 apartments,
yep.
or 160, yep. Somewhere along there?
Right, 100, just shy of 155.
Yeah.
And that's repurposing buildings. There's a great push in the country to do green architecture. Right? My opinion is the greenest thing you can do is to repurpose something that's already there.
Yeah.
I'm not building I'm not building as many walls. I'm not. My utility connections are right there. I don't need to build a new street to get there because the streets are there.
Yeah.
So then the infrastructure that supports those things are there. Buses, libraries, schools, police departments. So all of that is in place, and so I think it's the greenest thing you can do. I think it's the best in terms of looking out for the environment.
Yeah. Well, I think we can show that other picture now, the next to the last picture. And that's the one that I'm the most proud of, because this is the lake house that Wally designed for the family. And as you can see, looking down the driveway, it's a fairly simple cottage, and not very. But this is the back of it. And looking up from the lake, and that's all the windows and so forth in the back. And actually, on the other side, it's on a peninsula, and on the other side is similar windows. So that's our lake house. I thought, and I'm proud of it. Wally's proud of it. We built it about 11 years ago. So.
Yeah. Wow.
11 years ago, Walter.
Yeah.
So, well, I appreciate you coming again today
this was fun
to talk about your projects and all the things you've done in Richmond. I don't know when they're going to name it Wallyville instead of Richmond, but So it's maybe another 10 years it'll take, or something like that.
I hope they don't do
Probably
that.
need to get the right mayor in there. Huh?
We've got a great mayor right now.
Oh,
So
that's good.
I'm glad.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for watching Green Spring.